Governor O'Malley had planned to be with us today, but at the last moment, he was called away to participate in an Earth Day event with Vice President Joe Biden. Given that the university system has identified environmental sustainability as one of our highest priorities, I certainly have to applaud the governor's commitment to that issue, as well as his commitment to advancing the quality of education in our state. He asked that I express his sincere regrets in not being able to be with us today. I do want to quickly note that Governor O'Malley has made a support for higher education a cornerstone of his administration, most notably by providing the financial support necessary to build the quality of our institutions and to keep higher education affordable. I just returned from a national meeting of higher education leaders with our board chair, Cliff Kendall, and I can assure you that the funding support we are receiving in Maryland is the envy of my higher education colleagues across the nation. Governor O'Malley has fully recognizes the special importance of STEM education. I'm proud to serve as co-chair, along with June Streckfuss, of the Governor's STEM Task Force, which is charged with developing strategies to make Maryland a leader in STEM education and STEM-based economic growth. I'm confident that the innovations discussed at this symposium will find their way into our report. While it's unfortunate that the governor is unable to be here, his absence does afford me the high personal honor of introducing the United States Secretary of Education, Arnie Duncan. In education, President Obama has laid down a significant marker. By the year 2020, he wants the United States to reestablish itself as the world's leader in education with the highest percentage of college graduates in the adult population. The man who is charged with moving us on this path of reaching this goal is Arnie Duncan. If you listen to what Secretary Duncan said in his confirmation hearings, it is clear that he is the right man for this daunting task. At the hearing, he noted that providing high-quality education to all young people is the most pressing issue facing America. He characterized educating young people as both a moral obligation of society and an economic imperative for our country. And he described education as the civil rights issue of our generation, the only sure path out of poverty and the only way to achieve a more equal and just society. He has also called for a new era of science education in the United States that brings more specially trained science and math teachers into the classroom. To back up his words, he comes to this post with a proven record of reform and success. As CEO of the Chicago Public Schools, he raised education standards and student performance, and he improved teacher and principal quality. And perhaps most importantly, he has been given the tools he needs to implement the President's vision of educational reform and excellence. As Education Secretary, Arnie Duncan oversees more than $100 billion in new education funding from the President's America Recovery and Reinvestment Act. Just consider what a few of the President and Secretaries what the President and Secretary have committed to higher education. Just consider a few examples. $500 increase in Pell Grant, taking the maximum award to $5,550. $200 million for work-study programs. $14 billion in tuition tax credits for middle-class families. And something I hope he will talk about with us today, a $44 billion fund to protect K-12 funding and promote innovation in education reform. Secretary Duncan graduated magna cum laude from Harvard University, where he was co-captain of Harvard's basketball team and was named a first-team academic All-American. His frequent basketball games with President Obama have been much reported in the media. There is a famous quote attributed to Lord Wellington. He is reported to have said, "The Battle of Waterloo was won on the playing fields of Eton." In the years to come, I hope people will say that the seeds of victory for restoring America's leadership in education were sown on the basketball courts of Harvard and Chicago. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our Secretary.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction. I grew up watching Tom McMillan play, one of my big heroes, so it wasn't nearly as good as him and others, but it's been a lot of fun. Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here. I apologize for being a few minutes late. I'll keep my remarks pretty brief and be happy to take questions once I'm done. The American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, I believe, is an absolute historic opportunity to lay the groundwork for a generation of education reform. And we've talked about a perfect storm for reform. We have a president who is passionately committed on this issue, and it's amazing to me that despite a horrendous economy and despite fighting 2 wars, he keeps coming back to education day after day, week after week. We have a bipartisan Congress that knows that the status quo simply isn't good enough, that we have to get dramatically better as a country, that more of the same won't get us where we need to go. I'm very encouraged we have more good ideas, more innovation going on around the country than at any time in our history. I think over the past 10 or 15 years, we've seen this real flourishing of education entrepreneurs and innovators. And so much of my job, I think, is not to come up with the next great idea, but it's really to listen and to learn and to take to scale what works. And then finally, as the Chancellor said, we happen to have a few dollars to work with. And money never hurts in this effort. Again, think about $100 billion to go into education, an absolute unprecedented investment. And it's our obligation and our opportunity not just to invest in the status quo, but to push a very strong reform agenda and to use this money as leverage to, again, not just perpetuate what we already have, but to try and get dramatically better. We have $44 billion in funding now available under the Recovery Act. It includes money for public colleges and universities to avoid cuts and retain staff and professors. And this room knows how critically important that is. It can help support the modernization, renovation, and repair of college facilities. The Act also includes $31 billion for increased money for college access, $17 billion in increased Pell Grants, $14 billion in tuition tax credits. It's the biggest increase in money for higher ed since the GI Bill. Again, absolutely historic opportunity. As you guys know, the time of going to college has never been more important. It's also never been more expensive, and our families have never been under more financial duress. And it's so important those students that have worked hard really believe that they can go to college despite whatever financial difficulties their families might be experiencing. In addition to using these funds to save jobs and invest in quality programs, states have to provide assurances they will also push for K-12 reform on 4 fronts. And again, I can't emphasize enough how important this reform agenda is. First, we have to work on implementing higher standards and better assessments. I think in too many states we've dummied down standards. We're actually lying to children and setting them up for long-term failure because our bar hasn't been high enough. We need to better recruit, prepare, and reward outstanding teachers, particularly in often hard-to-staff areas like STEM and hard-to-staff communities, whether that's rural or inner-city urban. We have to dramatically improve underperforming schools and be willing to challenge the status quo, upset some apple carts, and do the right thing by children in those schools. And we have to create robust data systems that can track all of this information, that can link student growth to teachers and link teachers back to their schools of education to see which schools of education are doing the best job. I'm just a big believer in data and transparency. And the more we know the truth, the good, the bad, and the ugly, the better we can get. In terms of higher education access, our 2010 budget goes even further. We are proposing to replace bank-run loan programs with direct loans, saving taxpayers some $94 billion over the next decade. And we want to plow every single one of those $94 billion back into students. This is a controversial move. Not everyone thinks it's a great idea, but I think we should be in the business not of subsidizing banks, but of investing dramatically more in students who want to go to college. And we're going to push very, very hard to see that happen. As you know, we're going to increase Pell Grants to $5,550 and want to index that going forward to stay a step ahead of inflation going forward. And between Pell Grants and work study that are crucial, we have to help support the President's goal and think about this of getting back to the world leader and having the highest % of college graduates in the world by 2020.